Every now and again, I get comments asking how and or where I find all these incredible fan games, and what's really funny about that is that half the time I find them the same way that you find them, which is by watching some guy on YouTube. When it comes to Zelda fan games, my go-to source is a channel called ZFG. When I'm feeling like Zelda, that's where I go looking, so when I was browsing that channel and saw a video titled something like "Somebody made an Ocarina of Time roguelike and it's incredible," I said, "Shit." This is Ultimate Trial, and it will have been the 4th roguelike that I've spoken about during this marathon, and the 3rd Ocarina of Time mod that I've spoken of during this marathon, and it's one of the best I've ever seen in either of those two fields. Zelda for me is a lot like Mario in that I'm a lot more comfortable in 3D than 2D. I'm not the single greatest OOT player that ever lived, but I'm definitely better at that game than I am at Link to the Past, so I felt even more at home in this mod than with Infinite Dungeons. If you think that you're an OOT expert, you're gonna have to play this game if you really want to find out. With all kinds of new enemies, upgrades to the existing enemies, the marathon-like presentation of waves of enemies and hazards with nowhere near the amount of E for everyone style safety nets that you get with the original, it truly is the ultimate trial. Also, before I get too deep into it, I gotta mention, I know this is not the first OOT roguelike. A few years ago there was Star Fox Survival, which is still great in its own right, but Ultimate Trial is way different. This is a whole other ball game, and you are gonna love it. I promise. The premise is that Link and Navi were on their way to finally fight Ganon, but somehow they took a wrong turn in the Lost Woods and ended up in this strange, trippy world where they've lost all their possessions. They are greeted by a mysterious warrior named Sheba who assigns them the task of collecting 3 stones locked behind 3 grueling combat trials. The way this game works is that there are a number of trials that you must complete before you can escape the stronghold. There are 3 main trials which are essentially, going from room to room, killing all the enemies and mini-bosses until you reach the end. But you slowly unlock other trials as well, like this boss rush against jacked up, hugely upgraded Neo versions of the bosses from the original game that you thought you knew how to beat, and the Abyssal trial where you fight waves of enemies in a pit surrounded by flames. Il Piantissimo from Mario Sunshine is in the game, and he makes you speedrun the trials for a bottle. Given how crucial bottles have been to all of Link's adventures at this point, I'm kinda surprised the Hylians haven't turned it into a religious symbol like the Triforce. Although I suppose worshipping a bottle just looks kinda silly. During your trial runs, you will find no recovery items for health or magic, so whatever you enter with, you have to stretch it very thin over the course of the run. You're not gonna make some kind of Hail Mary pass just to be saved by some health drops. That's just not going to happen. All you get is rupees, which can be used when you return to the stronghold to buy all kinds of upgrades and supplies. Unlike Doom Infinite or Infinite Dungeons, for instance, there is far less randomness in this game. Instead of randomly generated challenges, many of the dungeons will be largely the same every time, so the game becomes meticulous planning and execution as opposed to the improvisation those other games demand. Combined with the fact that you retain most of your weapons and upgrades upon completion of challenges, it makes for a completely different dynamic. If you're not already familiar with all the little quirks of OOT's combat, the little tricks that were always part of the game, whether they were explained to you or not, you'd better be ready to learn them because this game is gonna slap you around if you don't. Even as somebody who's been playing OOT for most of his life, it was a good challenge. You have all kinds of new items and weapons to use, like the Rock's Feather, and the pinwheel that gives you a little dash.
3 pinwheels.
These things fundamentally change what Link is capable of, adding a depth to the combat that wasn't there before. I especially love using the Rock's Feather to do a super jump slash from mid-air. You can also jump while airborne, even with hover boots. It's really cool, and it makes the platforming a lot more engaging when you actually have to do it. There are also heavily upgraded versions of existing weapons, like how you can now get sharper arrows that do more damage, or the Platinum Hammer that's more powerful. The stronghold is just fun to explore too. It's detailed, it's storied, you can see its history written on its very walls, and the characters slowly drop hints and clues as to the mysteries of this place. Like, what is it that's brought everybody here, and who is Sheba, and what is his true motive? One of the coolest things about ROM hack scenes nowadays is that there's a lot of sharing of assets between ROM hacks. Everyone's always helping each other out. So what starts happening is you start seeing a lot of new enemies and assets in a ROM hack, as in new to the base game, but a lot of those new enemies will be familiar to people who have played other ROM hacks. I've seen a few familiar faces in Ultimate Trial, but then, out of nowhere, I was fighting the Asylum Demon from that game, Dark Souls, if you ever heard of that. There's this big-ass thing, I don't even know how to describe it. And then there's this Grim Reaper motherfucker with all these sick moves. This is just a really cool fight. This is the type of fight where even if you lose, you just gotta love it. Not far into the game, you unlock this Coliseum where you kill as many enemies as you can in 90 seconds, and since they all die in one hit, you can rack up points very quickly. And they're all dropping rupees too, so it ends up being a very super efficient way to get currency that you can then spend on upgrades, so it's entirely possible to just hammer it out here and then buy another heart container and repeat that until you're full up. I must have done this 40 times until I had purchased every expensive weapon and upgrade that was available to me. I don't know if it was supposed to be this easy to max out all your shit, but I'm not complaining. I've been through some tough-ass games, so it's nice to get a win once in a while. One of my favorite things about this game is all the little side stories. As you push through the game, the stronghold becomes more populous with all kinds of characters who all somehow ended up in this mysterious place. They all had lives and families that they were suddenly taken away from in this bizarre place where all who enter slowly begin to lose themselves. There's a frog named Toroto, not Totoro, Toroto, and he keeps reporting on all the new developments happening in the hideout, which is how you learn about the smith named Will the Smith, who will himself to Smith. There's a guard who has a crush on this lady named Nyla, but is too afraid to confess, thinking she won't reciprocate. Then you actually meet Nyla, who says she likes a guy in here, but is too afraid to talk to him, and you're like, damn, this is getting too real, I just want to stab more Skulltulas. One of my favorite details is this crazy looking guy who says he can see parallel dimensions and he must paint them or he'll go insane. And then when you look at the paintings, you realize that most of them are from other ROM hacks, Master of Time, Sealed Palace, see if you can name them all. The writing in general is also surprisingly good. On top of having humor and wit, there's also some really deep shit in there as well. This game says stuff like, "Let us embrace each heartbeat as a reminder that amidst time's eternal flow, we are fortunate to experience life's fleeting beauty." I'm always saying this. The presentation is incredible, even from the very beginning. It starts with this maddening trek through the Lost Woods with this aggressive blur effect to really set the mood. There are a lot of little details that I appreciate, like how the Triforce on the Hylian shield actually has reflectivity now. Somebody probably spent way too much time trying to get that effect to work and wondered if it was even worth it, but I noticed it, so that's good enough for me. And look, they even got the dungeon maps working. That's very impressive. Even some of the greatest OOT mods of all time don't have working dungeon maps. If you look at the Stronghold map, you'll notice that it looks kinda like a sword, and I'm choosing to believe that's intentional because that's just really cool. But the best thing, like always, is the soundtrack. OOT mods have always had great music, but this game has such a distinctive direction that it deserves special attention. I played a lot of OOT mods this year, and this is high in the running for my favorite one. And the competition is fierce. This has been an incredible year for this particular modding scene, so you'd better believe that I mean that in the strongest possible terms. If you like OOT, play this game. If you like roguelikes, play this game. And if you like hearing me talk about these games, watch tomorrow's video because it's definitely going to be a star-studded event. Hopefully a better event than the Game Awards were. I don't actually know how the Game Awards went because at the time of recording this video they haven't happened yet, but I'm just assuming they were mid because that's just basic pattern recognition after 10 years. But please, stay tuned and Merry Christmas, cousins!